Yes, I'm Kevin. I'm founder of Makershaker. We're a community platform for borrowers, but we're principally lenders. So we're pooled liquidity, transacting on P2P platforms. And in terms of my background personally, I ran a regulated lender here in the UK actually for about 7 years. And we were doing very similar loans to NFT lending. We were doing short-term lending, 30 to 90 days, similar APRs against very volatile assets. And there are a couple of learnings we took from that, right, which are relevant to what we're doing in this space. So when I was parachuted in to run that business in 2013, we were a very process-driven business, very data-reliant, and there were a few things that we did differently. So we started to become less process-driven, more focused on the borrower, and more focused on use of funds, what the borrower is going to do. Not traditional credit reference stuff, but more kind of getting to know who we're transacting with. And there's a couple of data points from that, right, which we're bringing into this space in that when we started to focus less on process and data and more on who we were transacting with, our default rates dropped by 60%, and there were a couple of factors around that. What that meant is that our books started to look a little bit better, and we were then able to reduce our pricing, our premium effectively, that we needed to charge people for those default scenarios, which meant as our pricing came down, we then attracted a different type of borrower. I wouldn't say better, but a different type of borrower that we were then able to lower pricing down. They performed better, and then we had this flywheel effect. And I suppose that's what we're trying to do at Makershaker. We're very borrower focused, less process focused, and and we're trying to provide liquidity in this space.
And so how long has Makershaker been providing this liquidity?
Within the NFT space, we're relatively new. So a few of us were personally lending very early on this year. The Makershaker platform as itself has only been up and running a couple of months, and in a very short space of time, we've done about 325,000 USDC of lending. Relatively small stuff, all within the Yuga Labs ecosystem. But again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on the type of borrower that we want to attract, so we can provide long-term credit lines to those borrowers. So we don't transact with people that we don't interact with. And I suppose another aspect of that is that we give those borrowers a lot of certainty off-chain outside of the smart contract as to the way that we'll behave. So the way we'll behave in terms of renewals scenario, the way that we'll behave if they default, and also we give that commitment to them that if they ultimately do default and we take the NFT off them, that we'll return a surplus to them. So whatever the equity is over and above what they owe debt plus interest, we'll return that to them. So those are the initiatives that we're trying to introduce, effectively our USP.
So what are some of the things you're looking for in borrowers that would make them good candidates?
Yeah, look, these are good questions, and I don't think we have all the answers, right? But there's certain things that we're doing. So we're looking for someone that is relatively established in the space. So, and it's imperfect, right? So we're looking at wallets, and we're running third-party API on wallets, obviously scoring those wallets. But those don't give us all the information, as you know, on that particular borrower's circumstances. So when we're engaging them, we're asking them basic questions. What other wallets have you got? So we can run our API on their other, and we can start to build up a picture. And then on a personal level, we're asking them questions around what is their use of their funds, okay? Because a borrower that's using our loan funds and using it to buy a property, because we're trying to do high value loans, that's buying a property, that's relatively liquid. So there's an answer there, or there's a hint there that they may not have liquidity to repay the loan. And because we don't want a default scenario, that's less attractive. So one of the particular borrowers that we talked about on stage today, he was very prescriptive that he was going to deploy the capital into granular collections, so small value assets, turned out to be the Renga floor that he ended up sweeping, which blew up Twitter a couple of weeks ago or 5 weeks ago. So those are really positives for us, right? Because what it tells us is that person's very liquid, because that person has used those funds put them into granular, small, bite-sized assets, and then we can see they're going to have liquidity available when we renew 30 days later and another 30 days after that.
Good. So shifting, a little bit to kind of what you said, and I didn't know it was your background, but one of the things that we hear a lot, and is one of the things that we're kind of facing being in the U.S. is regulation, right? So it's the R, the R-rated word here, right? But how do you see it, coming from the space with your experience and with what you're doing? How do you view, regulation in the space and what it would be?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think anybody has the answer on what it will look like. I think you do have in Europe, where we are now, we're obviously shooting this in London, you do have a lot more certainty outside of London and the rest of Europe with the introduction of MICA in terms of what that's going to look like in 2 years' time as a regulated environment, and they're being quite clear about what, they're differentiating stable coin versus non-stable coin, right? And they're obviously, we can all perceive scenarios where stable coin lending is viewed differently to non-stable coin lending. But I suppose one of the things that we did right when we were starting our bridging lending business is that had a lot of dynamics that were very similar to what the NFT lending space is at the moment, right? It was viewed as quite predatory by some. It was viewed as a bit like the Wild West, and it had this murky or seedy aspect to it. And one of the things that we did was a game changer here in the UK, and we were my business was a founder member of this. We set up this association called Association of Short-Term Lenders here in the UK, and it did two things, right? It enabled us to self-regulate our own industry without the regulator getting involved. And so I think that's important. So not having an answer for what regulation looks like in the future, because none of us know. But there are some things that we did in the past which we can do now, right, where we start to self-regulate. So I think that's important. And this is a good stepping stone, right? What we're doing today is a good platform for us to build. We're all getting together. The theme of what we're doing today is building trust in the ecosystem. So we are far removed from past experiences 15 or 20 years ago about these ecosystems that are built up. But the second thing it did, setting up this association, is it gave us a platform to discuss with the regulator. And instead of regulator having to come in with their heavy stick, interacting with individual operations, companies, decentralized or centralized organizations, what it meant for us, right, is that they didn't need to step into organizations. They had a body that they could speak to. And what that meant is there was breathing space for both parties. We could educate the regulator here in the UK about what we were doing, and they could understand that we were a very credible organisation, that there were some things that they thought were challenging. They could communicate those to us softly, and then we were then empowered to roll those out, rather than that kind of binary interaction with the regulator. So I think those, I've been speaking to a couple of the people here, some of the principals. Those are the things that have worked well in the past. Right. So it's not waiting for regulator with the big stick to arrive. It's starting to get our own community and ecosystem in some sort of order. And there's some easy wins there, and there's some stuff that's in the very difficult box, right? But, for example, doxing people, KYC, AML, but there are some things that we can do which I think would be viewed positively by a regulator, and then creating a space or a platform or a council where we can then start to interact with regulators globally.